Choose your intention. Love your life.
What's good? What's good? My beautiful infinite beings. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, welcome. At this channel, we engage in spiritual alchemy to help you realign, transform, and live your best life. Abandonment wounds can be tricky. Rumi is celebrated as reminding us that the wound is where the light gets in, but not if we haven't done the work. As a child, which is where many of our wounds originate, as a child, we might have felt some way responsible for a particular incident, and that led to a trauma, a wounding that occurred energetically, emotionally, physically, psychologically. As children, we often think of ourselves as the root cause for something, even if it's something, especially if it is something outside of ourselves. We somehow believe we could control it, like a divorce or something to that effect. We may have told ourselves as children stories about a specific event. For example, if someone left us, like a parent left us after a divorce or left the situation, of course, as adults, we may finally get that it is really more about the couple or parent that were working out their own particular issues, has nothing to do with us. But somehow we take that blame internally, and eventually it becomes such a pattern that we're not even aware that we're working from that particular pattern. Somehow we are wired from a sense of shame or brokenness, that somehow we weren't enough to keep the family together. It's our fault that our parent walked away, and that maybe even the other parent shut down emotionally. This can show up later in relationships, how we express ourselves or don't express ourselves. For example, if we have an extreme sensitivity to feedback, or we overact to criticism and with challenges. We have extreme tendencies
To be completely down during conflicts.
My parents separated long before I could even remember, but in my early school years, preschool, they told my mother that she should either consider homeschooling or a private school because I was sensitive. Not only was I picking up when people didn't care for me or were jealous or were angry or whatever their feelings were, I would take that in as my own feeling and just explode in emotion. And they told her that
she's not going to do well in, just the general schools. She's going to need a little bit more one-on-one.
Which even with the one-on-one, that really wasn't given to me, at least as far as I can tell as an adult. I wasn't the chatty Cathy. I was the one that was always trying to do the best in the books and being quiet and wanting to be accepted. When we continue to keep these particular wounds and leave them unchecked, they will lead to influencing our relationships and our very own behavior. Abandonment wounds can lead to internal self-doubt, people-pleasing, changing yourself so that you'll be more acceptable to those around you, finding that proof that proves that you're right and why this person should still keep you around. We seek validation from people who withhold it, even if they're cool to us, because it matters more that we keep that person and don't lose them the way we have in the past. It can present itself internally and externally. Internally, we may just simply have self-doubt and double talk to ourselves or even gaslight ourselves. We people please, or we find proof to prove that we really love the person, or that we really should be kept because we're a great person and here's my proof. Externally, it might show itself as ghosting, not wanting to connect with people because you're uber afraid of losing in a relationship. At the signs of conflict or challenge, bowing out and just not wanting anything to do with it, going the opposite way, or simply not stating the truth. And as we know, when we don't state our truths, we not only harm ourselves, but it can bring sickness and distress into our lives. We might find ourselves over-explaining about something that we should not even need to explain to people, just so that they won't turn away from us. Another thing is saying yes when what we really mean is no. And when we say yes to people, when we really mean is no, because on some level it would harm us, either physically, emotionally, or otherwise, we kill pieces of ourselves. We harm our own energy, our hearts, and we cause ourselves to trust less in ourselves. Not to mention seeming less valuable in other people's eyes. Other examples might include jealousy, the tendency to stay in an abusive relationship, to do whatever it takes to get that outside approval so we don't lose. And a lot of this stems from, as a child, not being taught how to self-regulate in ways that are healthy, not being true to ourselves. We were not taught how to be true to ourselves in a way that's not toxic. We were not taught to simply self-validate and not seek outside validation, telling ourselves that we're enough, we're okay. It falls on deaf ears when you have a deep abandonment wound, because it's more important to do what's right for other people so that you don't lose them. So I'll just tell you a little story. Before she passed, my mom told me that during my baby dedication, which is similar to a christening for those that do that, dedicated back to God as a baby by my parents. My father, who had been absent to that point, came in and my mom was holding me. They were married still, but he had been absent. So I didn't know who he was. And my mom had held me, but for some reason gave me to him. And he started talking baby talk to me. Well, my parents, apparently everyone who knew me, knew that they didn't talk baby talk to me. I had teachers for parents, so they always chose to speak to me in words. So when my father got really close to me and spoke in these weird ways, she said my eyes got big, I got upset and started crying, and he quickly handed me back over and said, "I'll be back. I'm going to the bathroom." And he never came back. My mom said, everybody kind of looked at each other after he left and they laughed. Well, now you have a child who you're not really going to explain that, that's not her fault. She's a child, so as most children do, they internalize. And so I was probably thinking something to the line of, oh, I lost one. I can't actually show how I really feel about a person because I could lose them. And everybody laughed. So she said, I had this weird look on my face. I'm thinking it was embarrassment as to something that I did. As children, again, we blame ourselves and not the adults in the room, for incidents that happen or misunderstanding. That, for me, was the beginning of a huge pattern where I went into people pleasing because I felt that I wasn't going to be able to sustain a relationship if these people were not happy with me. Sometimes it happens when people get divorced. The child will somehow blame themselves. It's my fault. that they're getting divorced or you went away during the divorce. I
mean, who really knows, right?
had a friend and his son completely went into anger and rage because, you know, his dad was absent for a little bit. At first, he thought his dad didn't love him anymore. His dad walked away because of him, but it was because of the relationship that had soured. Luckily, he was old enough to have conversations and they worked through it in time. But babies don't really know necessarily what's going on or have a keen understanding that it had really nothing to do with them. So throughout life, I constantly would overcompensate so as not to lose anyone. I would repeat that pattern, stuff my feelings down, and sweep things under the rug that needed to be said and stuff my feelings down until it was either a good time or not at all. I would consistently go above and beyond to make people happy and to prove my worth. I would constantly have a thirst for learning. This was the driving force for me becoming a professional ballerina and rising so quickly through the ranks. And it wasn't just something that I was good at, it was something where I could gain approval and love from all of the people in adoration from lookers on. As far as getting certifications upon certifications and degrees like my doctorate, that all came from that thirst to be loved, accepted, adored. In my head, I wouldn't be able to achieve without certain certifications or degrees. So I climbed through the ranks. I learned as much as I could, not because I was trying to best other people, but because I was trying to win approval and be good enough. That wanting to be loved or adored or liked by other people was constantly misunderstood by many people outside of myself. Often people accuse me of thinking I was better than them or trying to best other people, but it really stemmed from wanting love and acceptance. I paid a huge price in school as younger as the know-it-all, and I would know it all in only certain classes when I was asked and not when I would tell, because I definitely didn't volunteer information. But teachers generally knew in most classes I had the answer. So they would wait until they didn't get the answer and then they would call on me. And then that would start all bullying after the class. Sometimes I decided I was going to not give the right answer, so the teacher would stop calling me and then I would get called in for what's going on with you, instead of recognizing the pattern. And back then, bullying was not a big deal. It was something you had to suck up. Most people seemed to be okay with that. So I would stuff my feelings down even more. And when asked, I would say,
everything's fine.
And most people didn't want the actual answer anyway. And if I did tell the truth, it often led to some type of problem on my end. So I tended to keep it in and always look like the happy-go-lucky smiley girl. If someone hurt me emotionally, physically, I wouldn't speak up because I was afraid. I was afraid to lose. I was afraid to get in trouble. Early on, when I spoke my truth, it always seemed to offend or cause a problem later. There was always some type of repercussion for telling the truth. I didn't realize it was because I was actually misaligned with the people who were around me. I just thought it was something to do with me, and so my truth was not somehow valid. It really seemed like the only way to survive, in my opinion, and even thrive in some cases. So I would put on that dramatic mask and be fine. Stuff my feelings down, not be too emotional, too girly, be very analytical and logical, which is divine masculine energy. And I would ignore that side of myself. I would approach everything with logic, or at least what I considered logical. So I was holding and upholding my divine masculine energy while depressing and pushing away, turning away from my divine feminine energy. I basically turned my back on my heart. I turned my back on my intuition, on my wisdom, on pretty much everything. And later in life, that led to looking for relationships that I couldn't really be myself in, because when I did, these people would go. When I didn't and did all the things they wanted to do, and people please, they would stay, at least for a while. And once I started being myself, I would get blamed and shut out.
Oh yes, please be yourself. Oh, you're being yourself.
We don't like it because you're X, whatever that was. Fill in the blank. I would look for relationships where I could help them fix themselves and stuff my own truths and needs down in order for them to have what they needed to move forward. And as a result, many of the relationships where I was able to help people, they would flourish after I was out of it. And my story was more like, oh my God, I really wasn't good enough. And I couldn't figure out why for the longest time until I discovered the link with divine feminine embodiment. My personal needs and emotions were literally killing me and killing my inner self. I was self-sacrificing in order to prove myself. And as we know, we can't heal others. We have to do the work and they have to do the work to heal themselves. You might be wondering, well, how do I self-heal? I have the same type of issues. I'm not really sure what to do. Well, the first thing you need to know is that what happened before was not your fault. However, you refusing to do the work and to heal, if you refuse, that is your fault because you're making a choice not to do the work, not to move forward, not to move through that pain. And that's one thing that I had to remind myself, and then I'm constantly reminding clients, breathe and know that it's not your fault. The next thing is to notice your limiting beliefs. I have a video on limiting beliefs. I'll link it down in the description so that you can check that video out too. The second is finding those trigger statements that are based on that limiting belief. So when you hear it, either in your brain or out loud, reframe it. Let's say your trigger statement is, I'm not enough, or I'm broken, or I'm limited. This all comes from fear and shame. So if that statement is not true, which I'm pretty sure you can find ways in which you are not that way, reframe it. Simply, I am worthy. I am just enough as I am. If you say, well, I thought I was, but these people walked away. What did I do wrong? I'm not enough. I'm broken. I'm limited. The truth of the matter is, you're none of those. Your reframe could be more like, I'm more than enough. This disconnection or this rejection is actually part of my protection. I'm not in alignment with this person. So they had to leave because we're not vibrating at the same level. They're going to do their work and I'm very happy doing mine. Their rejection is my protection. For all you know, these patterns were passed down likely from generation to generation, not just on their end, but also on yours. It might be from something that went on in your family for generations and it's in your DNA. And now, we're all stardust. So we're all made up of all these particles. So we're the past, the present, accept what has gone on in the past, but sit in our present to make change in the present moment. So as things happen, try to remember to try the reframe in order to make the changes. The next thing to do is to take your power back. I also have a video on taking your power back. So check that out. The link again is below. Remember to cleanse your energy prior to bringing it back to yourself, prior to calling it back to yourself. Before you say yes to something, make sure you're not just being a yes person. If you find that you feel upset or hurt or angry, these are red flags that this is not the thing for you to do. Ask yourself, is it in my best interest to move forward in this direction? Is it in my best interest to say yes to this? Am I just trying to hold on? If you're trying to hold on, you're just abandoning yourself and you could do more harm than good. Your choices, if they're good or if they're bad, they will show up in your body. You'll feel it. So even if you have to close your eyes, try to locate any areas of tension in your body. I noticed in past relationships, one in particular where I really truly love the person, during an argument, it became very clear that very difficult for me to even hear. It felt like there was a closing off of energy, almost like a wooziness that came from my pelvis all the way up through my heart, and like a flush all the way up through my throat. It felt like someone was literally trying to strangle me. And I couldn't think. The only thing I could think about through the third eye, I will say, is if we're putting it in a sense of chakras, it went all the way from my root to the sacral, to the solar plexus, to the heart, to the throat chakras, along that midline, and stopped completely. And I felt I couldn't even think except for to think of what they needed or they wanted to make the situation better. And I realized that was a stress response for me, and that was not a good thing. I needed to let that go in the moment so that I could really see what's best for me. And I began to breathe into that. And when I did, I realized my body somewhat calmed a bit. And instead of feeling like this blurry or muddy kind of effect, I became a little bit more clear to speak to that person. And had it not been the feeling of an ambush, where I wasn't expecting it, and I had a list of things to talk about, it might have been a little bit easier to have a creative conversation that was truly helpful. It helped me to reassess what was going on in my head and come back down to my heart energy, my divine feminine energy, so that I could really feel my feelings and begin to be more receptive and more wise how I express myself. Instead of going into that third eye and processing in my head what would make him feel happy, I went into my breathing, open to it in that moment. When you catch yourself in the moment, it's so powerful, and it actually makes a switch so that you're more authentic and that you're more clear. You should never feel unsafe or any of the things that trigger you. So in the moment, try and catch yourself. So there are so many more tools and ways to address this wound, but these are some. These are some that will help you integrate a healthier patterning into your life. This is one of the reasons why I started a container of sorts in order to help others by using mind, body, spirit tools in order to affect change within. The details for that will be in a link, again, in the description. You can also consider coming to retreats that will be offered throughout the year, listed in my website. The link is below. So I have enjoyed speaking with you. I hope that this Heart to Heart Talks, from my heart to yours, helps you in some way. And until next time, smooches.
Thanks for watching, Infinite Beings. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, smooches.